From the studios in Lake Norman, North Carolina, it's the BENGEBUSTER Show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of the BENGEBUSTER Show. This week has been a crazy week. I guess the biggest thing on the news was the Battle of the Chicken Sandwich. Now, I hope some of you listeners wasn't the ones that got out there and got stuck in those long lines for that Popeye's chicken sandwich. But any event, that was the big news this week. I saw Chick-fil-A and Popeye was having a battle royal, if you will, of chicken sandwiches. Who had the better chicken sandwich? Who's a chicken sandwich champion? It goes back to having competition. If you don't have competition, then you're definitely your sales aren't going to be that good, or your product's not going to be taken in. So I think Popeyes having a chicken sandwich is good for Chick-fil-A. I won't tell you my favorite, but I can tell you my favorite chicken sandwich has been around for a long time. But anyway, this week's podcast is going to be fun. Had a lot of people comment about last week's podcast about Jeff Patton and I discussing great entrances, the best ring entrances from the 80s. And so I thought I'd bring Jeff back again this week. And instead of talk entrances, let's talk what was the best matches of the 80s. Some of the matches that were just good matches, and matches that were good, but the angle that they shot was even better. So we're going to be discussing that here in a little bit later on. But right now, we're going to go to a commercial break. NAWA has a great, big, huge wrestling event coming up this Saturday. And here's their commercial telling you all about it.
Saturday, August 31st, NAWA Championship Wrestling returns to Morganton, North Carolina at the Burke County Fairgrounds for Thunderdome 2. This can't-miss card features two special main event cage matches. Team Cartel faces Team Burke County Boys in a Thunderdome War Games match. Then, NAWA Heavyweight Champion, next to perfect Adam James, puts the title on the line against Thomas Extreme inside the steel cage. Do not miss the biggest show of the summer as NAWA delivers an exciting, action-packed evening of family-friendly entertainment for all ages. Also in action, NAWA Western North Carolina champion Lucky Ali defends against Austin Jordan. King Craig Classic and Leo Pride look to settle their feud. A gauntlet match featuring Myrick Moore, Max Carnage, Jet Yeager, Axel Jaggers, Dre White, and many others. Doors open at 6 p.m., bell times at 7 p.m. Adult tickets are $10, kids 6 to 12 are $5, 5 and under are admitted free. Be there at the Burke County Fairgrounds for NAWA Thunderdome 2.
Everyone, welcome back to the BENGEBUSTER Show. And as we talked about at the beginning of the program, today we're going to be discussing some of the hottest matches and feuds of the 1980s. And going to be bringing in my good friend, my good partner, Jeff Patton. Hello, wrestling fans, and I am back with my good friend, Jeff Patton. Jeff, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great, Tony. How about yourself?
Man, it's good. Last week I said long time. It's been a while, but now it's only been 7 days, so this is good. I like being able to talk to you more often.
Yeah, same. And of course, we'll see each other a couple days from now too. So.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. The NAWA's got their big event. Although I am not booked on this show, I am definitely going to be there. I'm going to be doing some interviews for my podcast, but I'm very intrigued by this show because the feud that has been brewing there in NAWA is, I think, finally going to come to a finish. The Burke County boys, I know they've been a big thorn in your side, but they are in the cage with the Carolina Cartel. I think the Cartel now comprises of the Golden Gladiators 2 and 3, Adam James. Of course, Adam's not going to be in the Thunderdome cage, but But I think in that cage, it's the two gladiators, Chris Thunder Anderson, George South, against the Burke County boys and Big Country. So that should be a really good match right there.
Oh yeah, worth the price of admission right there.
Yeah, and I know you're going to be excited to see the cartel finally get rid of those Burke County boys.
Hope so, anyway.
So how's your week been so far? What have you been up to this week?
Oh, just same old stuff, man. Working and being dad. That's the way it goes.
Yeah, I was, but before I brought you on, I was telling my listeners about the things that's happened this week. The big story this week was the battle of the chicken sandwiches between Wendy's and Chick-fil-A. So did you get caught up in that gimmick? Did you go try the new Popeyes chicken sandwich yet?
No, I haven't, but I've heard about it, and I think they both pale to comparison to Zaxby's, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. It's funny. You see these things happen, and then all of a sudden these memes blow up on Facebook and Twitter. One of the coolest ones I saw, I think this came out of Greensboro, but it was like the regional manager of Chick-fil-A had went to Popeyes and brought Popeyes some chicken sandwiches and said, "Hey, I know all your workers usually come and see me for breakfast, but since you guys been so busy selling chicken sandwiches, I thought I'd come and bring you mine." And so he was there giving these workers the chicken sandwich, and somebody had took a picture of him standing there next to this lady, and the meme underneath said something like, if you come work for me, you can go to church on Sunday. I thought that was pretty neat,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a crazy week for me too. I woke up on Monday not feeling too well, and wasn't sure what was going on. I just knew I had a really bad stomach ache, and I thought maybe I had ate something that just wasn't good. And come Wednesday, I find myself in the hospital, and I was having a battle with a kidney stone. And man, I thought that thing was going to put me down for the 3 count, but I kicked out and trying to feel better, and hopefully I don't have any more of those for a long time. But they always say once you get one, you're prone to get some more of them. And what can I say? It's painful, but I'm glad it's over.
Well, that's good. I bet it's not as painful as a Big Donnie splash, is it?
No, you're right. I was just about to say that. I said, kidney stones are tough, but they're not as tough as being in the ring with them Burke County boys. But hopefully, this week, if all the fans out there tuning in will come out and check out this great, huge wrestling card that's going to be taking place there at the Burke County Fairgrounds. I think bell time is 7 p.m. And make sure you get there early because it's going to sell out. It's going to sell out quick. I think every person in Burke County is going to be there to witness their heroes' demise. So I'm sure I've been talking to the Carolina Cartel. I've talked to the Gladiator number 3 and Gladiator number 2, and they've pretty much told me they got a plan cooked up for Big Donnie and Little Donnie and Wild Man James Brody and Jeff. I don't know if you saw the video, but the last time they all met, the Burke County boys were left laying in the ring in a big heap. The cartel brought out the baseball bats and chairs and everything they could get their hands on that wasn't nailed down, and the Burke County boys took a beating. So if that's any inclination as to what's going to be happening this Saturday, fans, you better buy a ticket because it's going to be a good fight.
Oh yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. Can't wait for it.
Yep. So now enough about that. Let's get to our podcast this week, Jeff. I know last week we discussed who had the coolest ring entrances and coolest theme songs, and I thought this week we would get back together again and kind of stay on that track. But this time, instead of discussing music, let's discuss what matches in the '80s really drew us in and got our attention. What's some matches that come to your mind?
Well, my most favorite wrestling match of all time is of course, the I Quit match between Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard.
Oh yeah.
Inside the steel cage, I still, there's just something about it. Not a lot of wrestling, not a lot of technical wrestling. It was just so brutal. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. One of my kids was here, that's been 6 months ago or so. And I was telling him about the match. I don't know how we got to the subject of talking about wrestling, but I was telling him about it. And so I searched it up, and I found the whole match on the internet. And I can't remember. I Googled it, or it was on YouTube or something. But he watched the whole match. And after it was over, he looked at me and he said, "Dad," he said, "they tried to kill each other."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I've never seen anything like that before." And I'm thinking, exactly. I said, that was the way it was when I was growing up watching wrestling on TV. It looked so believable. And, we talked about it last week. The wrestling back then looked so believable. And these kids nowadays are so used to what they see now, which is garbage compared to what it was in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that match, if you are a wrestling fan and you have never seen it, look it up, because it is something that the finish was incredible. The story leading up to the match was unbelievable. And then, of course, you get to the match itself, and, I mean, you just looked at the two at the beginning of the match while they're doing the ring introductions, and Magnum is staring Tully Blanchard down. He's not even selling, not even waving to the crowd or nothing. All he is doing is staring at Tully Blanchard. And when that bell rang, I mean, it was on. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually there at that Starrcade for that match, and man, the arena when Magnum when they raised Magnum's hand, the Greensboro Coliseum was just ecstatic. The people went nuts. Magnum was so over. It was very, very tragic that he had his accident, because I feel like had Magnum not had his accident, he definitely would have been the most popular wrestler. He would have sold more merchandise and more everything that I think than Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, or anybody else that came along. Magnum had everything. He had the look, he had the intensity, and everything. And like you said, everything he done was believable.
Yes, exactly. I'm trying to think of some of the others. I know there was one. I think it was the second Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup tag team tournament they had. Ric Flair and Barry Windham.
Yes.
That match was a wrestling match. I mean, and those two, just when they got in the ring, and I remember Ric Flair once said, he says, Barry Windham is the only guy he's been in the ring with that could keep up with him.
Yeah.
And and of course, I mean, any Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat match, I mean, was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Those two just had a chemistry when they were in the ring. Probably one of the other matches that I can remember was the Final Conflict in Greensboro. This was back in, I think it was 83. Rick Steamboat and Jay Youngblood against Sergeant Slaughter and Don Coronado. I mean, that was in a cage. And I mean, it was amazing, physical, bloodbath, and just truly an amazing wrestling match from the 80s.
Yeah, and I heard that show you're talking about, they actually shut down High Point Road going into the Greensboro Coliseum because so many people were trying to get there to see this event, and it basically shut down the road or the highway going up and down. It's actually called High Point Road, but it's like the main road that runs along Greensboro that goes right by the Coliseum and takes you down to East Lee Street. But man, think about that for a minute. that was 1983. They didn't have the advertising and like they do now. So imagine if wrestling was that over back then with just local television advertising. Imagine what it'd be like now with internet and cable and all and Facebook and all this stuff. Man,
and
it's too bad.
You we're talking about before pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about the only way you could see this wrestling match is to be in person.
Yeah.
That was it. That wasn't going to be on television. There was no pay-per-view. So and it reminds me of when I was a kid, Starrcade 85, to me, still to this day, is the greatest night of wrestling that I have ever seen.
Yeah, I agree.
I wasn't there, but as far as every show I've ever seen, to me, that was the best. And I remember as a kid, I didn't get to go to the event, so I didn't know what happened. And I remember I kept hearing rumblings. I kept asking people at school that I knew were wrestling fans, well, who won this match? And, did Magnum TA beat Tully Blanchard? Did Dusty Rhodes beat Ric Flair for the world title? And did the Rock and Roll Express beat the Russians? And I was just asking everybody at school, and they were like, we don't know. And some people would lie and say, well, Dusty won or something, and it didn't happen, or the Russians won. And they were lying, just trying to egg me on. But I really wanted to find out who won, and I couldn't wait. It was on Thanksgiving night on a Thursday, and Saturday rolls around, and I didn't think about it as a kid, but they taped the Saturday shows before Starrcade.
You're right.
So you still didn't find out who won because they smartly booked the TV for the weekend after Starrcade and didn't put any of the champions and guys going for belts on TV. So they didn't bring the belts out, so you didn't know who won. So you had to wait another week. But
and I remember back in those days, Jeff, if you went to a show like that, you didn't find out what happened for 2 weeks because their tapes were always 2 weeks behind.
Exactly. But like I said, it was 9 to 10 days after the show happened before I found out who won what. So, I mean, those are just some of the matches that come off the top of my head.
Yeah, and not getting off the subject here, but I just want to touch on this a little bit. Back in those days, we talk about there was no pay-per-views, there was no no cable like there is now. But I remember back then, belts would change hands on house shows sometimes, And I remember every week I'd turn on the TV and watch wrestling and think, okay, find out who won the belt tonight, who won. And then once they started getting these big events like the Great American Bashes and the Starrcades, that's about the only time belts would change hands. Belts didn't change hands anymore on house shows. So in one sense, as a fan, you knew, well, I can go to this house show and I know nothing big is going to happen probably. But if you wasn't a quote smart mark, you wouldn't have known that. So therefore, you're still going to go buy a ticket thinking that Dusty Rhodes is going to kill Ric Flair tonight in the Greensboro Coliseum. But then when you get older and you look back and go, well, belts only change hands at big events. But I think that was great marketing idea. But like you said, the worst part was you had to wait 2 weeks before you found out anything, unless you were there.
Right, exactly. And another match I remember was the third Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup, and to me, it was Sting and Lex Luger beat Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson in the finals that year.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the best match on the show. The best match on the show was the semifinal match, which had Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson against the Fantastics. I mean, that match was incredible. Because you had 4 guys that could perform.
Mm-hmm.
Not knocking Sting and Luger, but Luger couldn't wrestle his way out of a paper bag. We talked about that before, but
right.
That match was really good. I mean, anytime Tully and Arn could wrestle anybody and
make them stars overnight.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They really could. But yeah, those Crockett Cups, I always enjoyed those. I never got a chance to go to any of those growing up, but I did get to go to a couple Starcades. I went to Starcade 85 and Starcade 86. And here's my claim. Here's my claim to fame. I don't know if you know this or not, but this was a cool deal. So a couple of years ago, WWE comes to Greensboro and they're going to revive Starcade. So they got Starcade, and I was like, I was on the fence, like, am I going to go? Do I want to go? Am I not? And then it just so happened that ended up that weekend I didn't have anything to do. Everybody at my house was gone out of town or whatever. So I thought, I'm going to buy a ticket and go to the Coliseum, whatever. So I get on StubHub, and I'm looking, and I find a ringside ticket, pretty good price. I'm like, I'm going to buy a ringside ticket. So I get the ringside ticket, and I go there, and I'm actually on the 3rd row. And so, man, these are pretty good seats. And now, when you go to a WWE house show, before the show starts, they got the little ring announcer girl going around, and they're asking questions to people and whatnot. And anyway, and I'm just sitting there, looking around, taking everything in, and she comes out and says, this is the first time that Starcade's been in the Greensboro Coliseum since 1986, and anybody here came to any of the other Starcades, and Jeff, I think everybody in the section I was sitting, I believe this was, I don't believe any of them ever came to a wrestling match, in Crockett area. And I just raised my hand, like, because I'm just thinking she's just asking questions. So I raised my hand, and boom, she wants to interview me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm fixing to cut a promo at Starcade, And but the only thing I could think of when she called me over there, because that night, they had some legends there. They had the Rock and Roll Express, and they had Arn Anderson and Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. So the only thing I could think of was right there in that moment in time, thinking back to how the Rock and Roll Express was so over in Greensboro. So, and on top of that, so was the Horsemen. So the coolest moment, Jeff, I'm sitting there, and I told, and she came to me and she said, which Starcade, did you come to or did you go to? And I told her 86 and 85, and she's like, oh, okay. And I said, but and then she asked me, what's some of my memorable matches, and I said, well, there's more than just Starcade, because I came to shows here all the time. I said, and I'm gonna tell you, when the Rock and Roll Express, I'm sorry, I get ahead of myself. I said, but first of all, we're in Horseman country, y'all. And when I said that, Jeff, the whole Greensboro Coliseum started going woo. And man, I went from being a wrestling fan to being a wrestler. I started cutting promos, and I said, it wasn't just Starcade. I said, every time I came here, when the Rock and Roll Express came through that curtain, I said, the roof came off this place. I said, and man, the Rock and Roll Express, I said, they were so over, And then after that, what was cool was, I said, this is Horseman country. Well, later on in the night, one of the guys, I can't remember now who it was, but a couple of the WWE guys was having a match, and of course the heel was trying to cheat, and Arn Anderson comes to the ring and gives him the spine buster, and then so then the babyface pinned him, and then Arn got on the mic and he said, he said, oh, I remember now. It was Dolph Ziggler against can't remember who he worked, but anyway, he said, oh, Dolph, welcome to Horseman country. And I swear to God, I think he was talking to me when he said that, because I mean it was really cool. And the coolest part of that, when I done that promo, I thought, man, that was cool. I said, it'd be nice if somebody recorded that. And it wasn't 10 seconds. I get a text message from Jason Freeman, and he's sending me the video. And he had bought tickets, and he was sitting like the next row up, and he recorded it on the Titantron. So I thought that was really cool. And of course, I had a couple of the wrestlers that were there in the crowd, and they texted me and said, dude, you're a fan tonight. You're not a wrestler, so why are you trying to talk like a wrestler? And I text back. I said, hey, don't be hating because I got to cut a promo at Starrcade and you didn't. So, you know, I mean, it was a cool moment. And of course, after it's over with, I thought 10,000 other things I could have said and should have said and didn't say, and I should have put myself over, my podcast over, but anyway, it was a cool deal. And but you know, whenever I said, you know, this is Horseman country, y'all, and just saying that, man, 20,000 people in the Greensboro Coliseum all like at the same time said woo, you know, and I was like, this is cool. And then later on in the night when Arn done his spine buster, and he got on the microphone and said, "Oh, Dolph, welcome to Horseman country." That's really cool. I said, I think he was telling me thanks for that, but that was a cool deal. But getting back to our podcast, some of the other matches from the 80s that I think really stand out. One was from, like, it wasn't even from Crockett, it was from World Class Championship Wrestling, but it was Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair in a cage. And during this time, the Freebirds were still baby faces, and Michael Hayes was a special guest referee. And anyway, during the match, and it was in the cage, and Terry Gordy was at ringside, and they did a thing where Michael Hayes is mad because Kerry Von Erich wouldn't cover Ric Flair after Michael Hayes had punched him. So Michael Hayes is like, screw this, I'm out of here. And right as Michael Hayes is trying to get out of the cage, Kerry is like trying to get Michael Hayes to come back in the ring. So Flair gets up and runs over and gives Kerry a knee to the back. And of course it knocks Michael Hayes out of the ring, and then Flair takes a bump back. And when they turn around, who they see, they don't see Ric Flair, they see Kerry Von Erich. So Terry Gordy slams the cage on Kerry Von Erich's head. Flair pins him, but what happened there wasn't even Ric Flair. That was the night that started the Von Erich Freebird feud.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool deal there.
Yeah,
and that was a huge feud back in World Class Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it was the best feud that was ever there in World Class.
Oh, most definitely. And the Von Erichs, I mean, man, in Texas, I mean, my goodness. They were bigger than the show Dallas back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, they were huge.
Yeah, and incidentally, I have a friend of mine. She lived in Texas during that time that the Von Erichs were around, and I think she went to school with one of them. I can't remember which one, but anyway, she told me that that when she was growing up in Texas, everywhere she went, didn't matter where she went, Von Erich posters and stuff everywhere in Dallas, and she said that those guys were like bigger than Elvis Presley.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I kind of picture them being like real popular, like the Rockland Express was here in the Carolinas.
I was getting ready to say the same thing. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like Jerry Lawler in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then another match, Jeff, we talk about that I enjoyed was the first time that the Midnight Express beat the Rockland Express for the NWA World Tag Team titles. That was on the Superstars on the Superstation special edition, and during that time they were letting the fans write in and tell them, what match do you guys want to see, you know? And of course at that time Midnight Express had, you know, building up for this, Midnight Express had jumped the Rockland Express, and remember they had dropped Ricky Morton on Cornette's racket, and Ricky was bleeding out of his mouth, and then a couple weeks later they had this big match, and everyone thought Rockland Express was going to win, and then when the Midnight Express won, and but that match was to me was really good because it was just the beginning. Now, even though these two teams had been working with each other, down in Memphis, and Mid South, but us in the Carolinas never really got to see that. And when I saw that, even as a 10, 11-year-old kid, I'm like, these four guys got some special chemistry. And look how long the Midnight Express Rockland Express feud lasted.
Yeah, definitely. They put on some great matches. I think even, oh goodness, even when Dennis left and they put Sweet Stan Lane in there. Even that didn't slow the Midnight Express down at all.
No, in my opinion, I think it made them.
Yeah, Dennis is a better wrestler than Stan was, but still,
Stan had the look. When Stan came in my opinion, it gave the Midnight Express like a new look, and also they started wrestling better, differently. Kind of like when Dennis was with them, Midnight Express were just bad dudes. They just beat people up. But like when Stan came in, it's like that's when they started doing the fancier, double team moves, and then Cornette came up with these cool names for like the double goozle and the flapjack and things like that. And man,
yeah, the flapjack.
The flapjack, and then the rocket launcher. Of course, Dennis and Bobby always, they done the rocket launcher, but I know when Bobby and Stan would do the double goozle or the flapjack, I used to pop for that when I was a kid because when they hit you with it, it was over. And then I remember when the Fantastics came in, the Fantastics started stealing their moves. They started doing the flapjack, and but man, what some great matches back
then. They did
then.
the rocket launcher too.
Yeah.
They did the
yeah.
rocket launcher
Yep.
too.
They sure did. That's right. I forgot about that. And then another good match, another good matchup was the Road Warriors against the Russians.
Oh yeah, and man, I think back to Nikita. I think one of the most underrated wrestlers. There's two of them back in the Crockett days. Two of the most underrated wrestlers were Brad Armstrong. The second one was Ivan Koloff.
Oh yeah.
Ivan, you could, when Nikita Koloff came in, he was so green and so bad. And you could tell that Ivan worked very hard with him.
Yeah.
Because Nikita ended up being a really great sound wrestler. Definitely Ivan and Nikita and the Russians. Are you talking about the double Russian chain match they had?
Well, they had several. They had the double Russian chain, and then the very first time they met up with each other, I believe was at like the very first Great American Bash. I think that was '85. Road Warriors were the AWA Tag Team Champions, and the Russians were the NWA World Tag. So it was title versus title. Of course, it ended in a Broadway. But it was like the first time that those two teams met, and you knew then that they were going to have some good matches together.
Yes. Oh yeah, and how about any of the best of seven between Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff?
Oh yeah, those were good too.
And I think that, and of course Nikita worked a program with Ric Flair too for a while.
Yeah.
Before
they helped groom him,
and I think that helped groom Nikita as well and make him better.
Yeah, and you were talking about Ivan. I actually got the chance to work a few shows with Ivan, and I'll never forget the first time I worked with him. We done a six man tag. It was me and Ivan and somebody else. I don't remember now who my third partner was, but and we worked against Jimmy Valiant. I want to say maybe it was Jimmy Valiant, my cousin Mark and my friend Kenny in a 6-man tag. And, Mark would always take these crazy bumps anyway. So we're doing this match, and Mark told me, during the match, I gave Mark a drop kick, and I drop kicked him off the apron, and of course he goes to the floor, and I go to and Ivan says, "Tag me in, brother." So I tag in Ivan, and so I'm out there on the ring, and then I roll Mark in, and Ivan starts putting the boots to him, and Mark's like trying to get out of the ring, I guess. I don't know, he was trying to sell it or whatever. And I'll never forget, Ivan's like, in the ring, he was so smooth and so easy to, like, he's doing stuff, and I'm like, wow, it was so simple stuff, but yet it meant a lot. And so he was doing this thing where he was choking Mark, but he was making the referee, but he took Mark's hand and put it around his neck to make it look like Mark was choking him, but he was one choking Mark, and that was cool. But the funny part was when I kicked Mark off the apron and he takes a bump to the floor, Ivan goes, "Hey, come back here! I'm just getting to know you." That was so funny. It was great heat that he was saying. Of course, then the fans were throwing stuff at Ivan, but the coolest thing was after the show or after the match, we get back in the dressing room, and Ivan came over to me and thanked me. I'm the promoter, and here I am marking out for Ivan Koloff, but man, he was just so genuine to me. He was like, Boogie told me about you, and he said, normally before I go out and work, I get my money up front. Boogie told me I could trust you. He said, and he goes, and all my money's here, and he said, but the cool thing was, I really love working with you kids, because he's like, you can tell you kids put all your heart into everything you do. And he said, that's going to take you a long way in the wrestling business. He said, because heart, he said, if you don't have heart, you don't have it all. And I thought that was kind of neat. But Ivan, like you said, definitely way overrated. He actually beat Bruno for the WWF World Title, and I think he was the first one to beat Bruno in like so many years, right?
Yeah, I think Bruno had it for 10 years.
Yeah,
something like that.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and Tony, I've said this 10,000 times. The fact that Ivan Koloff is not in the WWE Hall of Fame is the biggest travesty of justice that's ever happened in pro wrestling.
I agree.
It's pathetic. It's horrible. How could a former WWF champion not be in your Hall of Fame, especially one who beat Bruno Sammartino?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How in the world? And when I look at people that they're inducting year after year, and I'm thinking, this is a joke. It's a joke. Who decides who goes in the Hall of Fame? It's got to be a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
That don't understand wrestling.
I think a lot of times now, when they're inducting these people, it's whatever town they're doing. If that worker was from that town, let's induct them because they're from blah blah blah. I think that's one of the reasons why they do it. And it's kind of like going back to the Freebirds. When they had the WrestleMania at Atlanta, Georgia, that's when they should have inducted the Freebirds, but they didn't. They waited till they got to Dallas, and then they inducted the Freebirds.
Why in the world would you do that?
What?
I mean, that's as dumb as Dusty not letting the Road Warriors win the World Tag Team titles when they did the show in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
I mean, you don't bury a guy in his hometown.
No. And so many promoters done that. And I even heard Flair talk about that a few times. How every time they went to Charlotte and when it was WCW, every time they went to Charlotte, they'd always have him lose, and he was like, "Why are you killing me in my hometown? Why are you doing that? That makes no sense." But a lot of promoters do that. Getting back to some really cool matches. Speaking of Greensboro, do you remember the show? I think this was like '87. It was Dusty Rhodes against Tully Blanchard. $50,000 versus the TV title, and that's the show where Magnum's at ringside. Of course, Magnum's hurt at this point, but he's holding the bag of money, and JJ steals the money and runs out the Coliseum with the money. Dusty gets on the mic and says, "Crockett, get my money." And of course, that set up their barbed wire match for the Great American Bash.
Yeah, I do remember that too. And the funny thing about that, the other day I saw didn't JJ shove Magnum down or something when he took his bag of money?
Yeah. He well, no, he didn't shove him down. What happened was Magnum was holding the bag of money, and Dark Journey tried to interfere in the match, and Magnum got up to go and try to get her off the ring or whatever. And when he did that, JJ came over and grabbed the money, and then I think Magnum tripped and fell over, and then JJ ran outside with the money, and then of course the angle, the realistic, how Dusty was always real back then, that they portrayed was, I remember on television, because I was at this show in the Greensboro Coliseum, and of course you don't see all this. The only thing you see is Dusty chasing JJ. You know, he like runs out the back of the Coliseum. Of course you can't see nothing else because back then they didn't have the big screens up. Dusty comes back to the ring. There's Magnum at ringside. You know, he's looking like he's depressed, like, you know, like he's the one that costed Dusty his money. And Dusty gets on the microphone and he's he's literally like doing a shoot promo, cussing. He's like, "Crockett, you better get my blank money," you know. And he's like, "JJ, you snake in the grass, you thief." And he's like, "That money's mine. So Crockett, you better get my GD money, right?" And so he's making it really, really real. And then you see him and Magnum, you know, walk out, and of course that's the end of the show. But then what you see the next time the week after or whatever it is they show it on television, they're in a dressing room and Tony Schiavone is trying to interview Dusty, and Magnum is like literally almost in tears, got his head down because now he feels he's handicapped. He can't, you know, he couldn't defend himself. He couldn't go after the money. He's blaming himself, and in that interview, Dusty tells Schiavone to get the hell out of his dressing room, and when the cameras pan off, you see Dusty hugging Magnum like, you know, it's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. But man, it was so realistic back then, and but you know, to me that was a good match. The match was good, but then it built up for something bigger, which was the barbed wire at the Great American Bash, and of course Dusty gets his heat back because in the barbed wire match he gets his $50,000 back.
Yeah, and that was at Charlotte Memorial Stadium, right?
Yes, That was for Great American Bash '87.
Yep, and that time they both had they did the ladder match too.
Yeah,
where they had the stack of money.
The money was above the ring,
and they both had seconds. JJ was at ringside for Tully, and they had Barry Windham at ringside for Dusty.
Right. Yep.
This time it's MTA, yeah. And I remember JJ came in the ring and hit the ref and grabbed the ladder, and then Barry comes in and grabs JJ and is choking him, and I can't remember what happened, but anyway, Dusty did something to Tully, and then Dusty climbs up the ladder. And
I think Dusty DDT'd Tully on a chair, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. And then Dusty climbed the cage. Now, talking about Dusty and special gimmick matches, one of the coolest matches that I got to see Dusty in, it was never on television, but I did see it in the Greensboro Coliseum. But it was Dusty Rhodes and Wahoo McDaniels against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. So Dusty and Arn are tied to a bull rope, and Flair and Wahoo. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't Flair. It was Dusty and Tully. Arn and Tully. So Tully is attached to Wahoo with a strap, and Arn was attached with the Texas bull rope. And I thought that was a cool match. And And I think later on in the years, we done something similar to that in Burke County wrestling. It was called the Lightning Strikes match, correct?
Yes, it was, and it was a chain instead of a strap.
That's right. Yeah.
The chain, two guys tied with a chain and two tied with a ball. And the funny thing is I didn't. I never saw that, so I didn't know about it. I just took the idea from the double Russian chain match that the Ivan and Nikita had with the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
And decided to put a little twist to it. And, hey, let's tie two guys up with a chain and two guys up with a bull rope.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I was in that match with you. It was you and I were a tag team, but it wasn't you. You were the Ghost Rider. And
yeah,
it was me and the Ghost Rider versus Sweet Daddy Brown and the Professor. And
yep.
I'll never forget, that was the night that I stiffed you with the cowbell because I thought the cowbell was gimmicked and it wasn't. And I remember coming off that rope and cracking you, and you said, "Oh!" You went down, and I said, I thought to myself, that was stiff. And I said, "Jeff," I said, "Brother, sorry I stiffed you," and you didn't say nothing. And I said, "That was stiff, wasn't it?" And you said, "I got a damn headache." And I said,
I had a headache halfway through that match because, man, it was like 150 degrees in that place.
It was.
You pay these guys rent and they don't want to turn the air conditioner on.
Right,
They're
right.
to rent their facility. They don't want to turn the air conditioner on. Man, it was 100. It was so hot in there.
It was. And I remember later thinking, "Oh God, he's mad at me." And I knew where we was going after that because you guys were turning me babyface, and I knew I was getting the pile driver. And I said, and of course at that time you and I we wasn't as close of friends as we are now. And I later thinking, and of course I was new too. I hadn't been wrestling but maybe a year, and I said to myself, "He's gonna break my damn neck." With that pile driver, he's gonna get me back for stiffing you. But you didn't. Everything was great, but I felt so bad stiffing you with that cowbell because I thought the cowbell was gimmicked, but it wasn't. Because I wasn't even using the cowbell. You had been using that, and I was with the chain with the Professor, and you were with the bull rope with Sweet Daddy Brown, and but man, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, it was. Definitely was.
Well, I guess we'll get close to wrapping up this podcast. Is there any other matches that come to your mind that really stand out as that you think was a really good match or show from the 80s?
I really can't think of any right now. I'll tell you one of the matches that was really good, and of course if you watch the VHS tape, or it was VHS back when they first came out, but of Starrcade '85, the match between Nature Boy Buddy Landale and Terry Taylor for the national title.
Oh yeah, that was a great match.
That was a really good match. But if you watch the they only show a few minutes of the match.
Yeah.
But if you get the pleasure of watching the entire, and I remember shortly after the show, they started showing some of the matches in their entirety on the Saturday night, the World Championship Wrestling show that come on Saturday night on TBS. And they showed that match in its entirety. And it was really, really good. The whole match was just, and man, the place was, and it was in Greensboro.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that match took place in Greensboro.
Yeah, it was Greensboro. Yep, sure was.
Half the show in Greensboro and half at the Omni in Atlanta. And that match took place in Greensboro. So,
yeah,
that
Jeff,
was really good.
One of the coolest things about that Starrcade, I remember, they had this big screen above the ring. And what they would do, they would have a match in Greensboro, and then when that match was over, lights would go down, and then the TV would turn on above the ring, and then you'd watch a match from Atlanta, and then when that match was done, it would go off, and the lights would come on the ring, and then there'd be another match coming from Greensboro in the ring, and it was so cool because it kept going back and forth, But then on the other side of it, you were like, dang it, I want to see all these matches here, And I remember going to the show, I thought I was going to get to see, the Ric Flair Dusty Rhodes match, Of course, that was in Atlanta. I was very disappointed when Jimmy Valiant's Atlanta street fight was not in Greensboro, but it was in Atlanta. But I should have known because it's an Atlanta street fight. But so I was kind of depressed about that. But we still got to see some really good matches from Greensboro. Like we got the I Quit match with Nikita and with Tully and Magnum, and we got the Russians and the Rock and Roll there in Greensboro too. And man, those were like you said, those were great matches. And one of the things about that match that stands out in my mind, because back then, wrestlers didn't if it was a cage, you were left in a cage. But I remember that match after the Rock and Roll pinned the Russians, Nikita threw Ricky Morton over top of the cage. And I remember as a kid going, oh my God, he's going to fall. Because I could see him pushing him over the cage. And I'm like, he's going to kill Ricky Morton. Ricky's going to die right here. You really thought that. So much realism, back then, there was so much realism to all the matches. Because, every match in Starrcade was a bloodbath. Every match was a bloodbath.
Yeah, well, pretty much. And, all the matches were just outstanding. And there was some story leading up to every match. That's what was cool about it.
Yeah. I'm like you. I'll go down in history, and we're definitely going to do a podcast on this coming up. But Starrcade '85 was definitely, my opinion, the best Starrcade of all time.
And to me, the best show of all time.
Yeah, they had 12 matches on Starrcade '85, 12, and like you said, every match there was history behind it. It wasn't just a match thrown together. Those matches were booked to end a feud that was going on.
Exactly. Yep.
Very good.
And all kinds of special matches, man. Bullet match.
Yep.
There was bullet match. There was the Mexican death match.
Yep.
Two cage matches.
Yep, two cage matches.
One of the cage matches was I Quit match. Goodness gracious, all kinds of the street fight. Just unbelievable.
And I'll give you some background on that street fight that Boogie had told me. The part in there where if you go back and watch it, Boogie and Bob Eaton are on the floor fighting, and Boogie gives Bob Eaton a hip toss on the concrete floor.
Yes.
And Boogie told me that when they were doing this match, he said all he knew, they was going on the floor and going to fight a little bit. He said Bobby said hip toss, and Boogie said, brother, we're not. No, he called hip toss, and Boogie said I went to pick him up to throw him in the ring, and he said, no, Boogie, hip toss on the floor. And Boogie said, you're nuts, Bobby. He said, just trying to draw money, brother. And I thought that was a pretty cool story.
Yeah, and the cool part was when I wrestled on a show and Bobby Eaton was booked on the same show. I wrestled a kid that I trained, and the kid was high flying, do anything, and I told him, I said, he caught me with a he did the suicide dive from inside the ring. I'm on the floor, and he takes off running, jumps over the top rope, and lands on me with a crossbody block. And I took a big bump on the floor. And as soon as I got back to the dressing room, Bobby stood at the door and watched all the matches, except for his. And he stood back there at the door, and he's got this big old grin on his face. Said, "How was it bump on the floor, man?" So I told him, I said, "Oh, it was great. I enjoyed it." So Bobby's
a great guy. Cool guy. I'll never forget the time I got to team up with him, and it was me and Bobby against George South and my cousin Mark, and so we're in our doing, working together and stuff, and I'll never forget. I told Bobby, I said, brother, I said, what do you want to do tonight? He said, I'm working for you. Whatever you want to do, that's what we're doing. And I'm like, okay. I said, let's do the Alabama Jam. And he said, what's that? And he started smiling. And I said, I said, you know, the leg drop off the top. He said, I think you you do it better than me. And I said, well, I haven't done it in a while. And he said, I ain't done it in 20 years, and I ain't doing it tonight. I said, that's cool, brother. I said, we got to do the double goozle. He said, let's do the double goozle. That's the finish. So that was our finish. We got rid of George and then hit my cousin with the double goozle, and it was funny too, because Bobby told me, he said Stan always rolls and I do the clothesline. He said, tonight I'm going to roll and you do the clothesline. I said, okay. So we did it that way, and it was so fun. But after the match, Bobby was like, dang, kid, he said you worked pretty good. And one of the biggest compliments he gave me, he told me this, and so did the kid that used to ride with him. I can't remember the kid's name now, but he was a really nice guy. But me and Mark used to do this spot where I snatch a headlock and shoot him in, and we do a little shoulder tackle, crisscross, hip toss, and then I do the arm drag. And I do the arm drags like Ricky Steamboat. And I'll never forget, in that match, I threw that arm drag on Mark, and Bobby said, "Damn, that's beautiful," and just like that. And then I reached over to tag him. He goes, "No, don't tag me yet, brother. Do another arm drag. That's beautiful." He wanted me to do two of them, so I did another one for him. And then and at first I thought he was picking on me or whatever. But after the match, we got back to the dressing room, and he said, "Man, brother," he goes, "I wish that I'd worked you tonight." And I took that arm drag. He said, "Man, that thing was beautiful." And then his little guy that drove him around, he said the same thing. He said, "Man, that arm drag's beautiful." And but see, I work heel most of the time, so I don't never do the arm drag. But I've gotten a lot of compliments on that, so that it looks like Ricky Steamboat's. Although I don't think it's nowhere near Ricky Steamboat's arm drag, because he's got the best one in the business. But it is fun to get.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. He told me when he asked me. He said, "Well, how was your match too?" I said, "Oh, it was great." I said, "I train that kid, and he'll do anything. I love working him and everything." And then he looked at me. He said, "Man," he said, "I got to tell you something." He said, "I worked a lot of these independent shows. You one of the best heels I've seen at the independent shows. And man, you really get the crowd into it." I said, "Well, I've always been able to do that."
Mm-hmm.
As far as getting the crowd to hate me, I mean, I was always the big heel, in BCW when we were running shows. So
yeah, that was some good times for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on my podcast, and I've really enjoyed talking about these classic old wrestling matches, and then throwing a little bit of our stuff in there with it. And I appreciate you coming on my show 2 weeks in a row. You're the first guest I ever had 2 weeks in a row, and I really appreciate that. And definitely here in the next few weeks, we're going to be doing a podcast on Starrcade. We'll do it on Starrcade 85 since we've already determined that's mine and your both favorite Starrcade. So we'll break down each match. And we'll be covering that here in the next few weeks. But fans, again, make sure if you're in the Morganton, Burke County area this Saturday, August the 31st, make sure you go take your family and your friends and your neighbors and everybody that you can put in your car, and go down there to the Burke County Fairgrounds and watch the demise of the Burke County Boys.
Exactly.
Well, Jeff, thanks again, and I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you on Saturday, my friend.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hope you have a good week.
All right, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another edition of the BENGEBUSTER Show. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, and tune in each week as we relive the glory days of professional wrestling.